Imagine facing an army of 40,000 men. They arrive in a fleet of nearly 200 ships, carrying the most powerful siege cannons on Earth. Their mission, handed down by the world's most powerful ruler, is to annihilate you. Your total force, including knights, soldiers, and local militia, is less than 9,000. This isn't a fantasy novel. This was the reality for the defenders of a tiny sun-scorched island in the year 1565. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we are diving deep into one of the most brutal and consequential clashes in military history, the Great Siege of Malta. So why was this small, barren rock so important? The story begins with two old enemies. On one side, you have the mighty Ottoman Empire, led by the legendary Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. By the 1560s, Suleiman had reigned for over 4 decades, expanding his empire to its absolute peak. His dream was to turn the Mediterranean into an Ottoman lake, and only one major irritation remained. That irritation was the Knights of St. John. The Knights were a unique brotherhood of warrior monks, a relic of the Crusades. Decades earlier, a younger Suleiman had actually defeated them and kicked them off their island fortress of Rhodes. After years of wandering, the Knights were given a new home by the Holy Roman Emperor, the Maltese archipelago. They were not happy about it. Compared to their previous home, Malta was a barren, treeless rock with poor soil. But it had one priceless asset: its Grand Harbour, one of the finest natural anchorages in the world. From this new base, the Knights resumed their old habits, acting as corsairs or state-sponsored pirates, preying on Ottoman shipping. For the aging Sultan Suleiman, this was a personal insult and a strategic nightmare. The Knight's new home sat right in the middle of the sea lanes connecting his empire. He decided that this thorn in his side must be removed once and for all. Malta had to fall. The leader of the Knights, Grand Master Jean-Pierre de Valette, was a 70-year-old veteran who had actually fought Suleiman at Rhodes. He was stern, devout, and completely uncompromising. When he heard the Sultan's armada was coming, he knew this was the final battle. He told his knights, "It is the great battle of the Cross and the Quran which is now to be fought." Against Suleiman's 40,000 men, de Valette could only muster about 9,000 defenders, a mix of 600 knights, some professional soldiers, and thousands of Maltese militia fighting for their homes. On May 18, 1565, the massive Ottoman fleet appeared on the horizon. The siege began. The Ottoman commanders, Mustafa Pasha and Piali Pasha, immediately started arguing. The admiral, Piali Pasha, wanted to first capture the small Fort St. Elmo, which guarded the entrance to the Grand Harbour. The army commander, Mustafa Pasha, wanted to bypass it and attack the Knights' main fortresses of Birgu and Singlia directly. They settled on attacking St. Elmo, figuring the small fort would fall in 3 or 4 days. It was a catastrophic mistake. The fort held out for 31 days. The Ottoman cannons, including massive basilisks that fired stone balls weighing over 150 pounds, began a relentless bombardment. The fort started to crumble, but its tiny garrison fought back with savage determination from the rubble of their own walls. They used everything from early firearms to terrifying weapons like Greek fire, a napalm-like substance that couldn't be put out with water. Every night, de Valette would send reinforcements across the harbor in small boats, feeding more men into the meat grinder. The fighting grew even more intense with the arrival of the 80-year-old Dragut Reis, the most feared naval commander of the age. He was a tactical genius. He immediately corrected the positioning of the Ottoman cannons and intensified the bombardment, systematically pulverizing the fort's walls. For the defenders inside, it was a living hell. But then, disaster struck the Ottomans. On June 18th, Dragut was hit in the head by shrapnel, likely from friendly fire. He fell into a coma and died several days later. The loss of their most brilliant commander was a devastating blow to Ottoman morale. 5 days later, on June 23rd, the Ottomans launched their final assault. The handful of remaining defenders in St. Elmo knew the end had come. They took their posts on the breach and were slaughtered to a man. The Ottomans had taken the fort, but at a terrible cost. They had lost up to 8,000 men, including many elite janissaries and their best commander. Looking at the ruins, a shaken Mustafa Pasha reportedly said, "If the son has cost us so much, what price shall we have to pay for the father?" To terrorize the remaining defenders, Mustafa ordered the bodies of the dead knights to be decapitated, nailed to mock crucifixes, and floated across the harbor. De Valet's response was equally grim. He ordered all of his Ottoman prisoners to be executed and had their heads fired from his cannons back into the Ottoman lines. The message was brutally clear. There would be no quarter and no surrender. With St. Elmo gone, the main event began. The Ottomans moved their cannons to bombard the knights' two main strongholds, Birgu and Senglia. For weeks, the most intense bombardment of the 16th century hammered the defenses. Beneath the ground, a different kind of war was being fought. Ottoman engineers dug tunnels to plant gunpowder under the fortress walls, while the defenders dug counter-tunnels to intercept them. Men fought with shovels and daggers in pitch black, suffocating darkness, listening for the faint sound of enemy digging. On July 15th, the Ottomans launched a major two-pronged assault. One prong was a naval attack, with 1,000 elite janissaries being rowed across the harbor. But de Valet had anticipated this. He had hidden a cannon battery at the base of Fort St. Angelo. As the boats entered the kill zone, the cannons opened fire with grapeshot, shredding the boats and the men inside. The naval assault was a bloody catastrophe. The siege ground on through the blistering August heat. The defenders were exhausted and supplies were running low. The climax came on August 7th. Believing the knights were at their breaking point, Mustafa Pasha ordered a massive, all-out assault. His troops stormed the walls and even managed to plant their standards on a bastion. It seemed that Birgu was about to fall. At that critical moment, the 71-year-old Grand Master de Valet himself grabbed a helmet and a pike and personally led a counterattack into the breach. His courage electrified the defenders, who rallied and fought with renewed fury. And then, a miracle happened. Unbeknownst to the Ottomans, a small Christian cavalry force stationed at the inland city of Amdina saw that the Ottoman camp was virtually undefended. They launched a daring raid, sweeping into the camp, setting tents on fire, and causing chaos. The Ottoman soldiers at the front, hearing the commotion, panicked, believing a huge relief army had landed behind them. Fearing his army was about to be trapped, Mustafa Pasha had no choice but to sound the retreat. The grand assault had failed, broken by a 71-year-old man with a pike and a handful of cavalrymen creating a panic. That failure broke the spirit of the Ottoman army. Their casualties were immense, and disease was now sweeping through their camp. Time was running out. All summer, a Spanish relief force, known as the Gran Soccorso, had been slowly assembling in nearby Sicily. Its commander, Don Garcia de Toledo, was notoriously cautious and delayed for weeks. Finally, on September 7th, a force of 8,000 fresh Spanish soldiers landed on Malta. When Mustafa Pasha heard the news, he fell into despair. His army was sick, demoralized, and decimated. Thinking the relief force was much larger than it actually was, he gave the order to lift the siege and retreat. On September 8th, the defenders of Birgu awoke to an unbelievable sight. The enemy was leaving. In a final, desperate gamble, Mustafa turned his weary troops around to attack the fresh Spanish soldiers. It was a rout. The exhausted Ottomans were crushed by the Spanish, who were joined by the surviving knights and Maltese streaming out of their fortresses. By September 13th, the last Ottoman ship had vanished over the horizon. The Great Siege was over. The cost was staggering. The Ottomans had lost as many as 30,000 men, a catastrophic blow. The defenders had also paid dearly. Of their 9,000 men, only 600 were still fit to bear arms. But they had held. Against all odds, David had defeated Goliath. The news of the victory sent waves of jubilation across Christian Europe. The myth of Ottoman invincibility was shattered. While the Battle of Lepanto 6 years later is more famous, the victory at Malta was the true strategic turning point. It halted the Ottoman advance into the Western Mediterranean and proved they could be beaten. In the aftermath, the knights knew they could never risk another siege like this. With money pouring in from a grateful Europe, they began building a brand new, state-of-the-art fortress city on the very peninsula the Ottomans had used to bombard them. They named it in honor of their heroic leader, the city of Valletta. The Great Siege of Malta stands as a powerful testament to leadership, endurance, and the strategic impact of military engineering. It was a moment when a tiny island became the fulcrum upon which the fate of empires turned, a timeless symbol of defiance in the face of annihilation. So, what are your thoughts on this incredible story? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.